Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Oh, great. There's still empty seats in some spots if you want to grab a seat if you're standing. Thank you all for coming. I'm Vicki Titanic, and I'm the town clerk here at the town of Oakville. And as hopefully you know, this is an information session that's jointly hosted by the 4 area municipalities in Halton. So we have Halton Hills, Milton, Burlington, and Oakville, as well as the region, all pitching in to host this for you tonight. So also, just so you know, Oakville's currently in the process of receiving nominations to fill a vacancy in our Ward 4. So along with the interested candidates that are here about the municipal election in the fall, we also have interested parties that may be here to learn about being a councillor for filling our Ward 4 vacancy. I'm not sure if there's anyone that wants to raise their hand in the audience that's here for that purpose. Maybe not, maybe? Okay, great, good to know. We're also wanting to advise you that this is your session on how to be a councillor, how to run for, how to be a councillor, but there are other information sessions that will be held in the various municipalities that will be also with the province that will be able to address other issues related more to the election process. So there are, you may want to check the municipality that you're interested in running for on their website, and they may have other sessions that are coming up that you might be interested in attending. So we're very pleased tonight to have Fred Dean here to provide you with this information. So you want to run for council? Fred Dean is a lawyer who acts exclusively for municipalities and municipal associations in Ontario. He began his municipal career in Scarborough and later with the City of Brampton before he became the city solicitor with the City of Sudbury. So Fred knows the municipal government and how it works, and he's worked with staff and he's worked with elected officials, and he's done that to help them make good decisions on behalf of their communities. So I think you can learn a lot from Fred tonight. Thank you, Fred. Take it away. All yours.
This is terrific. I've been talking to a few of you as you came in, and the number of people that are interested in local government is really significant. It's really important, and I congratulate every one of you that is here tonight to give some thought to it. I want to bring some reality to the world of local government and being a councillor and what's involved, because sometimes we get some pretty odd ideas about what it means to be a member of a municipal council, whether you're in Oakville or Red Lake or Ottawa, it doesn't matter. There are 444 municipalities across the province, and with one exception, they all operate under exactly the same rules. So you operate under exactly the same rules as a township with less than 1,000 people. And we'll talk about how that evolved. That's something that's pretty recent in local government history. The other reality that I'm going to talk about tonight, and I think if you're thinking of running for council, you really need to understand this. And that is, province introduced legislation. It's introduced all kinds of legislation, but one piece in particular called Bill 68. And it has been rolling out. It started last fall. Some parts came into effect in January. And the big hit is coming in March 2019. And I have said to people right from the first time I read that piece of legislation that it will have the single greatest impact on local government that I have seen since I got into the business, and that was 1975. So I want to share some of that with you because you really need to think through some of the issues around ethics and conflict of interest and the expectation of your community and your other members of council that are going to be put on you. So what I want to do tonight, as Vicki said, I'm not here to tell you about the process to get elected. I'm here to talk about what it's like once you are elected, what to expect and some of the things that are going to happen. And we'll take it through a series of stages. I was going to encourage people to ask questions as we go along. we can try that. If it gets out of control, then we'll hold them till later on, because they're not serving breakfast. So we'll see how far we can get. And I'm going to stay up here to speak. I really don't want this to be particularly formal. People have preconceived ideas, and they're not, generally speaking, grounded in reality. They don't have a real sense of what it's about. One of the things I recommended to the clerk here at Oakville today, Vicki, is that when you come to register as a candidate, get yourself a copy. Ask for a copy of the oath of office. This is the document you have to swear to if you're elected. It is, in my opinion, one of the absolute best 1 or 2 sentences that describes the ethical standard to which you must conduct yourself. Really important. And I think rather than getting after you're elected, take a look at it when you're thinking of running for office. So get a copy of that as soon as you can. I don't have to read that. You can read it. So I'm going to take you through what I call Municipal Government 101, which is a 3-day course, and we're going to do it in about 5 minutes. We'll get you the fundamentals, things that you need to have a sense about. And then we're going to talk about what I think is maybe one of the most important topics, and that is municipal powers. Where do municipalities get their powers, and how do they exercise them? And the fundamental principles, as I say, apply to all the municipalities right across the province. I then want to move on and talk a little bit about accountability and transparency. These have been the buzzwords in Ontario municipalities since 2006. The accountability and transparency model is being expanded next year significantly, and we'll talk a little bit about that, what it means to you as an individual who is on council. I'm busy after the election, and I'm busy the years between elections, and I often get called by municipalities. They're having problems. They're having difficulties, and they call me to see if I can help them out. And the primary problem that they have relates to the issue of roles and responsibilities. Who does what within the municipality? And you need to have a sense of what that is and understand not only your role, but the role of staff and the role of the CAO and the role of the public. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that, and the role of the mayor, by the way, as well. So we'll spend some time on that. Then we're going to shift gears, and we're going to talk about personal responsibilities. And we're going to deal with items such as the Code of Conduct, Municipal Conflict of Interest, and the Safe Drinking Water Act. And we'll take you through all of those because these are things that are imposed upon you personally. And it's important before you make the decision to run that you have a sense of what this is about. So let's get started. I was going to do this test. Maybe we'll do it. This is like 5-minute dating. I want to see if we can identify in the next 5 minutes what local government does for you. Anybody, give me one service local government provides. Fire, what goes along with fire? Police? Police? And emergency services, exactly, okay. This gentleman mentioned roads. What are some of the elements that go into roads? Yeah, enforcement, sure. What else? Maintenance. Yeah, what kind of maintenance? Winter and summer, very different. What else about roads? Yeah, that's all maintenance. What else about roads? Yeah, exactly, what they look like. A lot of that today fits into the category of subdivisions, okay, and they get planned and put in. What else about roads that's really significant? Construction, yeah. Once you've identified where it is, you've got to build it. That's right. That's regulation. What else? Drainage, yeah. Roads are used as drainage facilities. What else goes down roads other than traffic? Pedestrians, what else? Cyclists, what else? What kind? Runoff, yeah, that's one kind. What's another kind? Wastewater goes down, what other kind of water? Potable water, yeah, exactly. One of the amazing statistics about municipal government is it's one of the only organizations in the world that sells you a product, drinking water. And when you're finished with it, you give it back. Nobody else does that. It's amazing, but it's part of what we do. It's important to understand that roads serve a number of different purposes, not only the water and all that, but hydro and electricity, cable, and all those things are, the roadway becomes a system for it. All of those are independently regulated by different levels of government, municipalities, feds, and the province. Okay, what else other than roads? What does that mean?
Public transportation.
Buses, yeah. Really significant. It's becoming more important all the time. Another one.
Parks and open space.
Parks and open space. Parks and recreation as well. Yeah, that's important. Somebody mentioned one over here I wanted to talk about. Yeah, building permits are really significant, particularly in growing areas that you've got in this region, for sure. Did somebody say libraries? Yeah, of course you said libraries. Libraries are really different because council cannot run a library. Council has no authority in law to run a library. There must be a public library board, and it cannot be populated by members of council, at least not all of it. There can be some members on it. Municipalities have the ability and the authority to create what are called local boards or special purpose bodies. Library board's a great example. Health unit, conservation authority, police services board. These all operate under separate statutes. They all have different relationships with the municipality, some at the local level, some at the regional level. So they're significant as well. So we're providing services through a number of different agencies. Can you think of any other services?
Childcare.
Yeah, childcare, exactly. Any others? Heritage. All right, we'll stop the list there. I have to tell you, though, that you need to get over 100. And if you haven't gone over 100, you have no idea of what municipal government does. It's really significant that this is such a diverse, let's call it an industry, a diverse activity, the public sector. And here's the key. It is all highly regulated. Regulated by the province, regulated by the feds, and every municipality is obligated to meet those regulations and those standards. You talked about building permits. The way you build a building is you get a permit from the municipality, from the chief building official, but the rules that are in place are a regulation of the province. They're all regulated. How you supply water is all highly regulated. How you deal with your roads, the maintenance on them, the cleaning of them, all that, is all highly regulated. So you really have to be aware of some of the technicalities. Now here's the good news. If you're a member of council, there is no expectation that you are going to be experts in the technical aspects of running these activities. Whose responsibility is that? It's your staff. Exactly. But you have to have an overview. You have to be in the position of making the decisions, of being responsible for the policies that are being set by the municipality. Really fundamental. Okay, here's Municipal Government 101. Municipalities are functions of the province. That was found in the British North America Act in 1867. It continues today. It's true right across Canada. Municipalities have no inherent jurisdiction. You can't do what you want to do. You have to be able to find the authority in a provincial statute or regulation before you begin to do it. We've been given lots more discretion in the last 15 years or so in terms of municipal government, and there's some opportunities. But at the end of the day, all the power the municipality has comes from the province. There used to be a whole series of different kinds of municipalities. For the first 150 years of Ontario, there were villages and townships and towns and small cities and big cities. And powers were given to those municipalities based on size. So the villages got a little bit, the townships a bit more, and up it went. In 2003, that all disappeared. It's all gone. And now there are only 3 kinds of municipalities in the province. There are single-tier municipalities, which none of your municipalities here tonight are. They are municipalities, all of Northern Ontario is single-tier, but the Londons and the Ottawas and the Guelph, yeah, Toronto, exactly. They get this bundle of powers from the province. And it doesn't matter if there are 1 million people or 875, they all have exactly the same powers now as a single tier. In your circumstance, you are in what's called a 2-tier structure. There are lower tier municipalities, towns and cities, villages, whatever it is, and then an upper tier. The upper tier, in your case, is a region, but in lots of parts of the province, it's a county. And in one part of the province, there's a district. That bundle of powers that the province gives gets divided between lower tier, towns, and upper tier, the region. And there are agreements and there are legislative protocols that determine what those powers are. We don't need to get into that tonight, but it's significant that you have a considerable number of powers that are available to you as a council that you not only in part may want to exercise, but in large part must exercise. The new Act was called the new Act because it was rewritten for the first time in 2001 after 150 years. Contained a section 5. And if I'm working with councils right after the election doing some training, I have the bottom bullet point, Section 5 Municipal Act, on a slide all by itself with the words, "This is the key slide." Let me tell you why. It says, and it's very simple, it's really short, that all power of a municipality, all powers of a municipality shall be exercised by council and shall be exercised by a bylaw of council. It doesn't say it's exercised by a councillor, by the mayor, by the CAO, or by staff. It says all powers of municipality shall be exercised by council, by bylaw. That means that you're working together. So how does council exercise that power? Well, you must do so as a council at what I call a duly constituted meeting. And there are several elements to that that are really significant. They're really important. The first is municipalities have to tell the public that you're having a meeting. How does that get done now? Well, you put it up on your website. Is it in the clerk's office? Can I come and see it in the clerk's office? Some places put it in the library. There's a little township just north of Peterborough. They post it at the local coffee shop because that's where everybody goes. And they have a copy there. Here's the key. You're telling people in advance that you're having a meeting, but you're doing more than that as a municipality. You are telling people what matters council's going to deliberate and what decisions council's going to make. That's really fundamental, isn't it? If you're a member of the public, you want to be able to see what decisions council is going to be making. That's a really important concept because councils should, in my experience, should absolutely avoid adding items to an agenda at the last minute. If they haven't told the public that they are doing this tonight, then they shouldn't be doing it. There are techniques that you can build into the procedure bylaw to do that, but it's really fundamental. It's an issue of fairness that council and through its procedure bylaw directs staff to give notice to the public, to tell people that you're having the meeting and that you are not only having the meeting, but here's what's going to be deliberated, and here are all the background reports. Now, the exception to this is in the circumstance where you're having a closed meeting, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes. Even if you're having a closed meeting, you still must give notice to the public that you're having a meeting. But we'll come to that in a few minutes. That's part of this transparency, part of the accountability. Second thing is it has to be open to the public. Public is entitled to attend. and it has to be accessible. That's not an issue here. You've got a council chamber with a sound system. I can tell you some council chambers I go to, it's just a little U-shape with two councillors on either side and the mayor at the front end, and they talk back and forth, and if you sit in the gallery, you have some trouble hearing. Accessibility means not only being able to get into the room, but being able to hear once you are into the room. It's really important. And it's becoming more important with some of the legislation. The next important element is you cannot have a meeting without a quorum. What's quorum? Well, let's get specific. It's a majority, that's right. It's a majority of the members. I'm not good at it. I work with councils of 5 members usually because I can figure it out on my hand. So let's keep it simple tonight. We have a council of 5 people. What's quorum? 3. Everybody agrees 3? Yeah, it's 3. So if 3 show up, you can have a meeting. If 2 show up, no. All right. The next rule is everything is decided by vote, and the majority prevails. So let's do the test again. We have 5 members present. How many have to vote in favor of it? 3. Doing really well. Here's the trick question. There are 3 members present. We know that's quorum. How many have to vote in favor of it? 2. That's right, 2. Because that's a majority of the members present. Did you notice what just happened? Less than a majority of the council exercised the power of the corporation. You can do it in law, but you sometimes need to stop and say, maybe we should be waiting till the other members show up. You don't have to, but sometimes if it's significant to your community, you may want to take the time and stop and make sure that it's done properly. The last bullet point around the duly constituted meeting is that everybody votes, and that includes the mayor. Everybody votes. There used to be this concept that the head of council voted to break a tie. That's just dead wrong. The mayor gets a vote along with every other member of council. Oh. The question is, do you have to be a living body in the room when the meeting goes on? This is one of my favorite topics because Sudbury told me it was one of my favorite topics for 20 years. The rule has always been that you must be physically in the room. That's now changed. And there's now an ability for municipalities to allow virtual attendance at meetings if the municipality wants to do it. There has to be a series of rules around it. There still has to be a majority of members in the room. So that of our 5, maybe 1 or 2 could miss the meeting. You can develop rules around it. People are just trying to figure this out. It's brand new, like it's hot off the press within the last couple of months. So we're working on it. So the answer's yes, it's coming. Okay. Accountability and transparency, buzzwords, as I said before. The first best example I can give you of accountability and transparency is the fact that you have to have open meetings. They have to be open to the public. You have to give notice, all those things we talked about. There is an ability for council to go into closed meetings behind closed doors. There are 3 things you need to keep in mind around closed meetings, and 3 elements of it that I think are really significant. The first is it's a limited list for which you can go into a closed, council can go into a closed meeting. And they're all found in section 239 of the Municipal Act. And they're set out, and you must fit within one of those categories. So that's the first thing you have to do, and staff have to direct council with respect to that. The second is, how do you get into a closed meeting? Well, you get into a closed meeting by passing a resolution in public. That's the accountability and transparency piece again. And the resolution says, council's holding a closed meeting, and here's the general nature of the matter or matters to be deliberated. That's transparency again. The third thing they have to do relates to what they're entitled to do, what the council is entitled to do at the closed meeting. Can't make decisions. Can't make decisions. The Act says that they can deal with not administrative, but procedural matters and can give direction. So they may give direction to the CAO to negotiate for a piece of property, but they can't buy the property at a closed meeting. That's it. Those are the fundamental rules around closed meeting, and the expectation is that the public knows when the council is meeting in closed and knows the general nature of the matters or matters. That's all a part of transparency. The other side of this list deals with policies, and these are council policies that must be in place. And all of them down to the one, harassment, are all set out in the Municipal Act. They are all required, they're mandated, and they must be maintained. If you are running for office, I encourage you, I hope it's on all your websites because you're going to be busy tomorrow if it's not. Get a copy of the Accountability and Transparency Policy. That is the policy that says how your municipality is attempting to ensure that it is being accountable and being transparent. You'll learn a lot by reading that document. Believe me, it's a really useful tool. There has to be a harassment policy. In fact, council has to be trained on harassment pretty early on. My recommendation to councils now is they be trained, council members be trained twice during the term. This is becoming a huge issue, and I want you to park this thought until we get to later on in the evening and I start talking about codes of conduct. It's going to be really significant. Yes?
Can you give an example of when a closed meeting is appropriate versus an open meeting?
Sure. One of the reasons that you can go, council can go into close is with respect to a property matter, the acquisition or disposition. So let's say the council or the municipality wants to purchase a piece of property. They want to purchase your property. It would be pretty difficult to have that in open session because you would then find out what the municipality is prepared to offer you for the property. If you can do it in closed, it gives the municipality a negotiating position. So that's a good example. And there are a series of them there. Take a look at the list and you'll get a sense in practical terms how it plays out. Municipalities need to be, in my experience, avoiding closed meetings as much as they can. But there are occasions when it's absolutely required. It's absolutely necessary. The last item on this list is coming in March next year, and it says that there must now be, at that point, a policy dealing with the relationship between members of council and staff. And frankly, this is going to get tied into the code of conduct for members of council, so it's going to be interesting. I haven't heard of anybody that's got this written yet. It's going to be interesting to see what it looks like, but it's another policy, it's another example of how the province is trying to make municipal governments more transparent and more accountable. So it's on the horizon. Okay, I said that R&R was the area that kind of keeps me in business between elections, and it's absolutely true. So I want to go back. Remember we talked about powers and we talked about regulation and the province sets out the rules? Well, that's true for the job, for council members and for staff and for the mayor. It's all set out in the legislation. There's a job description. Take a look at it. I'll give you a summary, but I'm not giving you the details of it. You need to read it. You need to see what the job is. You wouldn't apply for any other job without looking at a job description. You may want to take a look at this one. So we're going to go through those very quickly. Council exercises corporate powers. Municipalities are corporations in law. They're persons in law. So in effect, the council is like a board of directors of a corporation. Has far more powers than a regular corporation has. The Act says that the council represents the public. I don't have to tell you that. People know that instinctively. That's what the role of council is, to represent the public. The Act goes on to say that members must consider the best interests and well-being of the municipality. Interestingly, municipality in this case has two meanings. First is the geographical boundaries, makes sense, but the second is the municipal corporation itself. It's really fundamental that members of council, you can disagree on issues, but at the end of the day, you have to meet that principle. Let me give you an example how it got out of control in Sudbury at one point. We had a little bit of a problem with water and trees going into people's basements. We ended up with 450 lawsuits. The councillor for the ward was going around door to door. You should sue the municipality. So the CAO and I had to chat with them and said, you know, that's probably not acting in the best interests of the municipal corporation. Had absolutely no impact on him at all. And he was back out knocking on doors. I phoned our insurer. The insurer wrote a letter to council and said, if this guy doesn't stop, we're canceling your policy of insurance. It's a contractual obligation a municipality has, not only for the corporation, but for all of its council and officers and employees to act in the best interest of the corporation. That stopped them. But it's a really good example that you've got to be aware that you're acting in the best interest. You come to solutions, you're going to disagree on how to get places, and that's really fun part of being on council. One of the key elements, and I'll talk about this later, is you can have great debates at council, but you need to maintain it on the level of principle. The best council I ever worked with was a council back in the early 90s in Sudbury. Bright group of people, really smart, articulate, and they fought with each other all the time. But they fought with each other on principle. They all, at the end of the day, had the best interests of the municipality in mind. And at the end of the council meeting, they all went out and had a beer. They were all good friends. Their families got together. But they were passionate about the issues. But it never became personal. The minute it becomes personal, that's when I get the phone call, quite frankly. It happens. It's important to do that. Oh, by the way, you wouldn't all go out and have a beer now, because that would be a meeting under the new Municipal Act. You can't do it. Yeah, so I've talked about acting collectively with public notice. That's all the fundamentals around how you exercise power as a municipality, and people expect to see that. Here's the key. There is no management function, there is no worker role in the job description for members of council. It's not your job. If I had to define the job of a member of council in one sentence, it would simply be this. You are a decision maker, you set policy. You do not go out and decide where the snow is going to be put. You don't go out and decide how much chlorine to add to the water to make sure it's safe to drink. That's not your job. And we're going to see that I can get you in some difficulties in a little while. Powers exercised by council. Members of council have limited powers. It's important to keep that in mind, that your power rests at this council table, and we'll talk about the importance of that in a few minutes from now. So that's the job description that the province has given municipal councillors, and it's in the Act. Pre-2003, the province had mayors and reeves and wardens and chairs, and they were all set out in the Municipal Act. That's all gone. The term now is head of council. And so a head of council can be, you can call them a mayor, a reeve, a warden, whatever. But here's the other interesting thing. Council can call the head of council anything they want. Stop laughing. If you wanted to have the grand poobah, you could do that. Not sure why you would. There's one place in the province that has a Lord Mayor. You know where that is? Niagara-on-the-Lake. They got that back in the 1980s because I think it was around the Shaw Festival and one of the oldest municipalities in the province. But you could do that today. If council wished to do that, it could change and have a Lord Mayor. I was talking to the council in Niagara-on-the-Lake at the last election, the last two elections actually. And I talked about the fact that anybody can do this now. How would council change the name of the head of council, by the way? Pass a bylaw. Exactly. It's the exercise of power. And I said, you know, anybody could do this. And the CAO came to me at the break and said, you can't tell people around the province they can do it. And I assured him nobody else wanted it. Nobody wants to go there. The Act says that the head of council has to be good at meetings, has to chair the meetings. And in fact, the Act has been expanded now, that section has been expanded to say so that the meetings are run efficiently and effectively. If you're thinking of running for mayor, understand you better be really good at chairing meetings. And there's a lot that goes into that. I have the opportunity of training mayors after the election. And we spend a lot of time on how mayors, because sitting in the mayor's chair is very different than sitting in any of these other chairs, believe me. It's a very, very different world. They have to be good at meetings. The Act provides the heads of council provide leadership to council. Notice what it says. It doesn't say leadership to the organization. It says leadership to council. There's a very clear distinction in the Act between the administration and the council side. It's really important to keep that in mind. Head of council has an obligation to provide information and advice on certain matters, including accountability and transparency. And that generally gets done, in my experience, around the budget. There's another part of being a head of council that confuses people, not as much as it used to, but for a long time, the head of council of municipality in Ontario has either been or acted as the CEO, Chief Executive Officer. Now, if you're from a business background, you know what that means. It's day-to-day management. It's not what it means in the municipal sector. And it got defined in 2006. And the definition that's in the Act, again, this job description that's in the Act, really sets out that the role of the mayor is to act as, in effect, the champion or the cheerleader for the municipality. Really significant role to fulfill. But there is no management function at all. No managerial function at all. So where does council get its advice? Council's going to make good decisions. It has to be getting good information. Where does it get its advice from? Staff. Staff's a primary source. What are some of the other places that members of council get their advice from? Residents, absolutely. Where else? Businesses in the community, sure. Yeah, associations. Where else? Yeah, lovely. Consultants. Yeah, lawyers. I was waiting, that usually comes much earlier. Where else? Other municipalities, associations, province, feds. You get information from all sorts of sources. Usually by this point someone has said spouse, you know. It comes from all sorts of different directions. It comes from research you do yourself on the internet. I mean, there's information that's there. But here's the important part. The Municipal Act recognizes that the key information coming to council, the primary source of information, is from the municipal staff. Staff have an obligation, as it says, to undertake research and provide advice. What is that? Well, those are the staff reports that go on the agenda. The staff reports are there and they have a recommendation. That's the primary, that's the starting point for council to be receiving information. It's really fundamental. So it's in the statute that staff have this duty to carry this out. Once, if you put a bullet point between the first two, staff provide the advice, write the reports, give the information. Council then makes a decision, hopefully. And once that decision is made, staff have an obligation to implement it. Whether it was supported by staff, whether that decision was the one that staff recommended or not, doesn't matter. Staff have an obligation to implement the decision of council. Really fundamental. Staff also have an obligation to set up a bunch of administrative policies and procedures. Council, in my experience, never sees those, or rarely does. It's how the place functions on a day-to-day basis. I was reading a chart in the clerk's area just before we came down here, and it talked about the administrative role in terms of providing advice to council and getting that information through. It's a really fundamental one. Staff are there to provide advice. Staff are the technical experts, and if they don't have the technical expertise, they've got to go get it somewhere else. It's really important to keep that in mind. I had a council member, this was a couple of years ago now, who said to me, Fred, council's just a rubber stamp. We just rubber stamp everything. We just rubber stamp everything that staff gives to us. And he was lamenting the fact that this was just a terrible situation. And I said to him, that's the best news I've heard in a long time. Why is that? Well, because staff and council are on the same page. You're moving in the same direction. If you have a council that's turning things that staff send over and not accepting it all the time, there's a disconnect. So if you are functioning well, understand that the report that goes to council from staff does not have to be approved by council. It can be changed, it can be turned down, it can do all sorts of. At the end of the day, it's council that makes. I'm not responsible for the tech stuff. We okay? Yeah, we're okay. Really fundamental. So staff play a significant role in terms of providing advice to council. The Osborne and Gabler book goes back to the 70s. I'll let you read it yourself. I think it's one of the best images that there is in terms of rowing and steering the boat that you can have. It really defines exactly what the role of staff and what the role of council is. It's a big question. How does council make decisions? Really significant because they are required to make a lot of decisions. We calculated one time, my colleague and I, how many decisions councils across the province make in a year, and we estimated at a minimum it's 40,000. Do a lot, okay?
For each municipality?
No, for, yeah, God, no. So the question is, how does council make decisions? We've heard that you get input from staff, and staff prepare the reports and make recommendations to you, but you also have information coming from your committees. Every municipality will have a slightly different, some substantially different committee structure. And it's always worth looking at that committee structure because sometimes it can be really, really inefficient. Let me give you two examples. Did some work with a municipality, and the call that we got was, we're out 4 or 5 nights a week all year long, maybe 2 weeks off around the holidays. We're getting tired of all that. This was from the members of council. And so what we did was we went to the council, we met with council, and we gave them each colored crayons and a big piece of paper, a bunch of pieces of paper, and we said, draw out your administration and draw out your committee structure. And what they were doing was every time they took on a new service, they created a new committee. And they put 2, 3, 4 councillors on it. No wonder they were busy. By the end of the night, they had whittled it down from 14 or 15 to about 4 or 5. Committees take a lot of time. If you're a member of council, it takes a lot of time going to all these committees. If you think you're running for office because there are 2 council meetings a month and that's all there is, and you've heard it's low hours and high pay, think again. You know, it just isn't the reality. Committees can take up a lot of time, and they take a lot of staff time too, I have to admit, because they have to prepare the agendas, do the reports, be at the meeting, do the reporting out after in the minutes and all that. It takes a lot of effort by everybody. We went through this in Sudbury at one point. Council thought they had too many committees. They counted 54. And the recommendation from council was, let's take a look at these and we're going to apply a test. And the test that council applied is this committee providing council with good information? And if the answer was yes, the committee survived. And if the answer was no or not sure, was gone. So they shrunk the number of committees from 54, they shrunk the list slightly to 4. And that was appropriate. It worked far more effectively as an organization, having a fewer number of committees that were providing real work, doing real work. Because you create committees to do some of the legwork on issues that you bring to council. That's what you're using them for. I talked about local boards, the ones that have special authority under different statutes, and council will have some funding relationship, but at the end of the day, these boards operate pretty independently. I debated whether to take the next bullet point, which says meetings, 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 and fill an entire slide with as many times I could put meetings on it as possible. One of the realities of life, if you are going to be on council, you better love meetings. Because if you don't, you're going to have a miserable 4 years. And not only that, you better be good at it. Because if you're not good at it, you're going to have a miserable 4 years. Here's one of the realities. You have to do the numbers. I'm going to do the 5-member council again because I run out of fingers. If I'm on council and there are 5 members, how many friends do I have to have on council? 2. Why do I have to have 2 friends? What's a majority vote? You need to understand that if you're putting something forward, you have to get support of other members of council. That means you need to have some friends on council to help you out. And if you don't figure that principle out early, it gets really frustrating. Really frustrating. It's important to keep that in mind all the time. The other thing about meetings that you'd better be aware of and understand really quickly is you better love to read. I mean, you better really love to read. When I left Sudbury for an average council meeting, the paper was this thick. And then, by the way, the next night they went to the region and the paper was this thick. With the new planning legislation coming in, someone said to me today that the reports are going from this thick to this thick. You better love to read. And I'll explain to you later why you need to read every single page on every single agenda, not just on the committees that you're on, but on every committee that's coming forward. Why? Because buried in the middle of that could be a conflict of interest. And if you miss it, too bad. So you need to be good at meetings. You need to understand how the procedures work. Every municipality has a procedure bylaw. Read it before you even think about running for council. And don't treat it as a really dull document that doesn't say anything. It's the living document that it is the single most important document in municipality in terms of relationships, how council members relate to each other, how they relate to the mayor, to staff, and to the public, how you get things to council, how you get them on the agenda, how they get approved, the whole process. It's all there. You need to read it. You need to go through it. And if you have questions about it, the clerks are going to shoot me. But you need to call the clerk and ask the question what it means. Take a look at it. I have to assume the procedure bylaw is on all your websites. And you can find it there. Okay.
So that procedure bylaw, that's not from Ontario government statute. Each municipality makes their own procedure.
The question is a procedure bylaw a provincial document? Well, the answer is yes and no. Yes, the province says you must have one. Every municipality has to have a procedure bylaw. You can create parts of it the way you think that best reflects your community. There are other parts of it, though, that you don't have any say over. Quorum, we talked about that. That's in the Act. How you vote, the voting procedures and processes are all set out in the Act. What happens if there's a conflict of interest declared? That's all set out in legislation. So it's a mixture, and municipalities put their own bylaws together, and they're all changing them this year because of Bill 68 changes that are coming into effect. So you really, it sounds like a boring topic to spend time on, but let me tell you, if you get this right, it really can make a difference to how much you're going to enjoy experience at council and at meetings. So love meetings and love to read, and read it all. Okay, I thought we'd take maybe 7 or 8 minutes now and stretch because you can only absorb so much. I'm going to flip now to the other side of the world, and I want to talk about you personally and how your life's going to change and some of the personal aspects around codes of conduct and conflict of interest and family. I don't know if any of you are brought your family with you tonight. It's really useful to have. I did one of these sessions Monday night in Stratford, and there was a couple there. The lady was planning to run, and they had the 2 teenagers there as well. And the teenagers were really engaged. They were asking great questions, and it was really good. The impact it will have for you running and being successful to run on council is enormous to your family. And if you don't stop and think about that and talk about it, you're going to have some problems, I promise you. Let's take 7 or 8 minutes. hopefully. Okay, maybe we can get started. One of the things I do when I'm about to do a presentation is I put some notes in the margin of what I want to talk about. The problem is I completely ignore my notes as I go through the presentation, so I forget the things I want to say. One of the things about staff that I think you really need to have a handle on, and that is the key person in my experience for members of council in terms of how to navigate around the municipal government and meetings, etc., is the municipal clerk. These people are really, really well trained at what they do. They're there to be helpful and they're knowledgeable. They know the procedure bylaw really well. Rely on them. They're there, believe me, they're there to help and they'll make a huge difference for you. You're going to see them at every council meeting. They're the ones putting the agendas together, making sure the materials are there. So if you want to talk to somebody at the municipality to start with, that's where I would start. That's where I'd begin. Well, it's the end of October and the results are in and you've been elected to council. That's the one night of the year you will have an ego bigger than just about anybody else's in the world because all your friends voted for you. I'm this popular person. Trust me, it won't last. But what will last is the fact that people will treat you differently from that day until the end of the term. They will treat you differently walking down the street. They will treat you differently if you're at church or in the gas station. They will not be hesitant about calling you on a Saturday night at 10 o'clock or 7 o'clock Sunday morning. They will want to keep in touch with you. With social media now, there'll be 100 different ways they can contact you. Understand that you cannot disappear in your community. You are a community leader. You've taken on that mantle. That's really significant. So everything you say to someone, whether you've been a friend of theirs for 20 years or you just met them today because they walked up and said congratulations, everything you say, they are listening with a different filter than they ever have before. So it's imperative that you put your brain to work before you put your mouth to work. Think about what you are saying to people. Think about how you are responding to people. Some people are going to want to goad you a little bit to get you to say something. You need to be careful because they may goad you and the intent is to get you to respond in a certain way and they may have recorded the conversation. Be really cautious. You need to think about the world of the media. You're going to be now a media star to some extent. You're going to be doing interviews. It may surprise you to know that if I have to do a media interview that I know is going to last 3 or 4 minutes, it takes me longer to prepare for that than it does 1 hour of these sessions. You need to know before you talk to the reporter, whether it's microphone, TV, in print, you need to know what your key message is. And you need to be able to define that key message and deliver it. Henry Kissinger stood in front of the press corps years ago in Washington, and his opening statement was, "Who has questions for my answers?" You need to be prepared for the media. If you're not, you simply will not present very well. And if you're not ready right after the media love to come at you at the end of the meeting and they'll put the microphone and say, give us a comment. If you're not ready to comment, say, I'll be back to you in 5 minutes. What do you do in those 5 minutes? You go define your key message. Make sure that you get the 1 or 2 key messages you get out and that it gets part of it. It's really important. Every councillor, in my experience across the province, should get some media training. It's really important to do. Because, again, you're public figures. The other thing that will happen is that your family will look at you differently too. Because you may have a full-time job, but you just took on another full-time job. May call it a part-time job, but it's not. One of the realities of local government, whether you are on council or on staff, in my experience, is that it consumes you. It just takes over your life. Why? Because it's really interesting. You're a community leader. It's really, really interesting stuff. You need to have some conversations with your spouse and your kids before the election to talk about what life is going to look like. You're sitting at dinner and the phone rings, and I said this the other night, and the phone rings and your 8-year-old picks it up and somebody at the other end is swearing and screaming at them. What do? You need to train them as to how to deal with that. Your wife gets stopped in the grocery store by someone who's really angry at what you did at council 2 nights ago. Again, we went through that in Sudbury. It was a huge issue, and the community, a large part of the business community, was very opposed to what council did. The spouses of every member of council were terrified to go into small business stores because they were berated every store they went into. It was really, really fascinating. So understand it has an impact on your life. Understand this too. If you're running for mayor, you're not merely running for one job, you're running for 2. Talked to a mayor one time. We were doing a session together down in Eastern Ontario past Kingston. And he said, you know, I was on council for a couple of terms and I ran for mayor and I became mayor. And I was so excited, and I went home that night and my 9-year-old son, I said, I won. I'm the mayor now of the community and I'm going to be on county council. And the son looked at me and he said, I guess I lost. Understand, this can take a lot of time away from your family. You need to balance that out. Give it some thought. I'm not saying don't run, but you need to have the discussion. You need to have the conversation. It's really important to do. Makes a difference. I mentioned before, not everyone will agree with you. I think that's true. I think one of the best characteristics of really good counselors I've ever met are they have great ears. They're good listeners. And they may not be able to agree with the person at the end, but they will give the person the sense that they understood the issue and they took the time to understand it. It's important for council members to do that, in my experience over the years. So it's 24/7, as it says. You need to be committed to it. You can't sort of dabble in and out of it. I talked before about the meetings and the reading. It just keeps coming at you. It is relentless. You will get paper or stuff on your computer every single week, lots of it to read. You'll be thinking about what's appropriate, what decisions are appropriate. How does this impact my ward if you're in a ward system? It really becomes important. I talked about 2 tiers earlier. I'm not going to talk about that again. Yeah, talk to your kids, talk to your spouse in terms of what it's like, because it's a really very different world. Here are some things that I put on my list that I think really become important. I talked about roles and responsibilities being an area where things get off the rails. That's micromanaging. That's where a member of council wants to go out and direct work, either in the municipal office or out in the streets or the yards. It's not appropriate. And it causes, I can tell you, more disruption in your organization. If you want to be effective as a council, you need to avoid that. And rest of council needs to understand how to deal with a person like that. It becomes really important. One of the things I'm seeing happening in some parts of the province, which is a little bit disturbing, is we're seeing members of council, and to some extent staff in some places, who are acting in what would be called an uncivil way. It's not harassment, it's something short of harassment, but it's just generating problems. And here's the test that you can always tell if someone is acting in an inappropriate way. in an uncivil way. If someone makes the comment, oh, it's okay, Tom's always been like that, you just identified a problem in your organization. That's a person being uncivil to other people in the organization. It can really have an impact, particularly if it's happening with people in the front office at your municipality. They're going to feel really, it's going to feel very difficult for them. If you're elected to council, you're going to know all sorts of secret stuff. There's lots of confidential information floating around the municipality. Lots of municipalities, probably not here anymore, but municipalities used to have reports go to closed meetings on colored paper. You still do that? No. Do you? What color do you use? Blue, that's good. Green? It's when they say pink that really gets, just doesn't work. Your bright colors. Documents that go to closed meetings and other documents that are confidential, you have an obligation as a member of council to keep those secret. You will learn a great deal about your community, but you're not in a position to share it until council says you're in a position to share it. That includes the discussions that go on at closed meetings. They're confidential. They can't go any farther. There's this wonderful story from a couple of years back now, where there was a closed meeting of council, and council was dealing with something really significant for the community. The meeting came to an end, and they all went home, and this one councillor went home, and he crawled into bed with his wife, and there was some pillow talk, and he told her everything that happened at the closed meeting. Got up in the morning, went off to work. His wife, the mother of the daughter, told the daughter all about it. And by noon, the entire school knew all about it, and by dinner time, the entire community knew. That's inappropriate. Confidentiality includes confidentiality from your spouse. I know that's hard to say, but it's really significant. It's really important. It also includes confidentiality at the coffee shop. I've met councillors who like to be heroes and go to the coffee shop and share everything that's going on in the municipality, and they blur the line between public and confidential. Be really cautious around confidential information. It can have a huge impact on your community and on council. And it will have a huge impact on how other members of council see you. If they know you are the leak on something, they will not treat you really well. Trust me. It's been my experience. Okay, so let's talk about personal responsibilities. A lot of what I did at the beginning, we talked corporate responsibilities, but I want to get down and into some issues around personal responsibilities. One of the things that's going to happen, there's going to be some huge changes coming. I said that before in March of 2019. And one of the biggest changes comes around codes of conduct. Today, codes of conduct for council, these are for councillors, are discretionary. Municipalities can decide whether to have one or not. Most don't right now, but they have to have one in place by March 1st. And if you have a code of conduct, you have to have an officer of the corporation called an IC, Integrity Commissioner. And an IC has to be appointed by council, and the role of the IC is to investigate alleged breaches of the code of conduct. And the IC doesn't make decisions, the IC makes recommendations. So if someone complains, and it's pretty straightforward to put in a complaint under a code of conduct, it may be a letter, it may be a statutory declaration, and that starts the process. It's investigated by the Integrity Commissioner, and the Integrity Commissioner reports to council, and council decides on the penalty. Penalty is a reprimand or up to 90 days, a loss of up to 90 days of the councillor's remuneration. For most places, that's not very significant, frankly, but that's the penalty right now.
These codes of integrity commissioners, appears to me based on what you said, that they really should be a person who is not employed by the municipality. Would
That's right, they aren't. They aren't.
Yeah, okay.
I act as an integrity commissioner for some municipalities. We're on contract. You retain us to act for a certain length. Now, sometimes you hire an IC for a specific complaint. I've done those. But what's going to happen in March of 2019, you're going to have to retain someone for 2 years or 4 years or whatever it might be. To council. They're appointed by council. Council determines the penalty. Have you been following Whitchurch-Stouffville? The mayor with the interesting wall? Suzanne Craig is the integrity commissioner in that case, and she has recommended to council, she took each individual offense and created that as a separate matter. The mayor of Whitchurch-Stouffville is not receiving any remuneration from now till the election. Council just took it all away. 90 days, 90 days, 90 days, 90 days. That's significant. So we're going to be looking at that. The province has just brought out a regulation in relation to what is a minimum to be in a code of conduct, but every municipality has to look at it differently. It's going to deal with a couple of things. It's going to deal with confidentiality, for example. It's going to deal with gifts. How do you deal with gifts as a municipality in terms of what you get? And a code shouldn't say you can't have gifts. It should set out a formula as to how you receive gifts and what's appropriate and how it gets reported out. That's the important part of it. But we're going to be seeing these codes developed and passed. Let me ask quickly, do you all have codes? No? You're working on them. Yeah, they're coming. The only appeal process is to go to court. Oh, no, that's not true. The other process is you can appeal to the provincial ombudsman, who will not do an investigation but will determine if the IC did an appropriate investigation. So in that sense, it's there. Hold the question. We're going to come to it from another direction in a minute. Yep.
Yeah, this is a general number. Out of the 440 municipalities, how often does a breach really happen?
How often does it go forward, or how often does it happen? Oh, there's more than those being reported and going on now. Yeah. How many are breaches are happening on a regular basis? Once we know. But stay tuned, because I'm going to tell you that number is about to escalate big time. Okay. The other thing that's happening in March is the Integrity Commissioner is getting a whole bunch of new powers. One of those new powers is an obligation to educate council and the public. So stay tuned. You need to be aware that the IC has a responsibility to train on the code of conduct, not only the members, but the public, and members of local boards as well, by the way, because this applies to them. So the educational piece is important. There's another aspect to it that's going to be really, really interesting. The Integrity Commissioner, a member of council who isn't sure about something, can write to the Integrity Commissioner. Notice I said write, has to be in writing. And ask for the Integrity Commissioner's opinion on the matter. And the council member will get it. We're going to have to see how that works. It's going to be interesting for some members of council who have a question on a matter that's coming to council next week. And I can tell you, Integrity Commissioners will not respond that quickly, because some of the questions are very difficult. So, but there's now going to be this obligation to provide written opinions based on written requests by council members. By the way, all of the costs related to an Integrity Commissioner is paid by whom? Municipality. Yeah. So we're going to have this extra cost. We're going to see how that extra cost goes up significantly in a moment. Before I get to the Conflict of Interest Act changes, I thought I would spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes talking about the basics of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Because if you don't have a handle on this, you can find yourself in pretty deep water pretty quickly. This act came into effect in 1972, and it was passed to allow members of council to contract with the municipality. It was prohibited before that time. So if I have Fred's Widget Shop on Main Street and I want to supply widgets and the contract's going to council for approval, I'm caught by the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. This act deals with members of council, and it says that if a member has a pecuniary interest, pecuniary is financial, in a matter that's coming to council, they have an obligation to declare the pecuniary interest. And they have an obligation to indicate the general nature of the pecuniary interest. Your Worship, I'm declaring a pecuniary interest on item 4 because I own Fred's Widget Shop. Pretty straightforward. Or my street is being reconstructed, and I'm declaring a pecuniary interest because I own this property here, and it may have an impact on the value of my property. It goes beyond the just personal conflicts. It also deals with family. It deals with if you're a parent or a spouse or a child has a pecuniary interest and you're aware of it, it becomes yours. You have to declare it. So, Your Worship, I'm declaring on item 4 because Fred's son's widget shop is bidding on the contract. So that's family. It goes beyond that, though. If you are an employee of an employer who is coming to council for some particular reason, in my years in Sudbury, council members worked for Inco. And they were either in the front office or they were 5,000 feet, and a matter came before council that involved Inco, they all declared a pecuniary interest. Had to do that. So employers. If you own a company, if it's Fred's Widgets Limited, it becomes my pecuniary interest. If I have a controlling interest in a publicly traded company, if any of you have 10% of the shares in CPR, and CPR comes to council, you have to declare pecuniary interest. And if you do have 10% of the shares in CPR, what are you doing sitting here? If you are a partner in a partnership, if you are a member of a body, and this is the one that drives people crazy. I was hoping the province would clarify this last year, but it didn't. So if you're a member of a ratepayers group, if you're a member of the local ski club, or if you're a member of a condominium, or any association, and that association's coming to council, you may have a pecuniary interest. You need to get some advice and find out if in fact you do. So what does the Act say beyond declaring it? What does the Act say that you have to do when you have a pecuniary interest? Okay, you can't vote, you can't participate, and you can't influence. So there's 5 things that have to happen. You have to declare, you have to state the general nature, you can't participate, vote, or influence. And it's influence not just at the meeting, it's influence before, during, or after the meeting. There was a case in Huntsville where a councillor wrote a letter to the municipality, to the finance committee, and said, I shouldn't have to pay this. And the court found he breached the Act by influencing. You need to be cautious. The Act is being amended. I'll give you this amendment now and then we'll get to the rest. That influence is going to go beyond what people have perceived it to be, influencing other members of council, to influencing staff. You will not, we clearly legislated you cannot influence staff. You can't call up the staff member and say, I've got a conflict on this, can you make sure it gets through? You've just breached the Act. One of the changes that's coming, and some municipalities are doing this already. Yes, sir.
With regard to that issue of declaration, should you not remove yourself from the meeting, period?
I love it when they're 30 seconds ahead of me. It's good. No. Let me deal with that. What the Act says is that you shall not influence. What a lot of communities do is the members leave the table and they'll sit in the gallery. and they'll watch the meeting as a member of the public. There's no obligation to leave the meeting. You're entitled to watch the debate. You're just not entitled to influence. Now, it's probably a good idea not to be making faces or gestures at people around the table, may be interpreted as influence. But no, I don't think there's any obligation to leave. The test is influence. Test is influence.
So it's totally on your onus to recuse yourself. The other councillors don't have to vote and say,
No,
yeah, we can't have a vote.
no, no. It's a personal obligation. We're going to see how that plays out in a minute. Yes? Okay, here's the wonderful issue. We're going to talk about this in detail in a minute. You're sitting at the council table and you know this member has a conflict. You just know that he does. And everybody else in the room knows too, but he's not going to declare it. I'll tell you why he doesn't in a minute, and then I'll tell you how bad his world's going to be come next March. There's no remedy for another councillor saying, you've got a conflict, you should declare. The answer to that is always go to court. If you're not satisfied, you have an obligation to take them to court. But that world's changing come next March. What I want to say is you declare verbally at the meeting and the clerk records it in the minutes. Be really cautious what you declare because the clerk's not there to write fiction. So if you say I'm declaring a conflict on item 4 and the minutes come out saying Councillor Fred declared a pecuniary interest on item 4 because he owns Fred's widget shop, that's fiction. You have a personal obligation to ensure that you have properly declared it. Province is taking it one step farther and they are requiring you now to write out the declaration as well as verbally say it at the meeting. It's really significant. So the advice I'm giving to members of council is write it out in advance, read it at the meeting, and then give it over to the clerk. And the registry will contain both the minutes, what's in the minutes, and this written part. And they should be exactly the same. You don't want to get yourself in trouble having two different declarations. So that's coming, but a lot of places are doing that right now. Okay, so that's the current world. Very difficult because only an elector can bring an application against a member of council who alleges a breach of the Conflict of Interest Act. An elector, that's it, it's limited. And it's a court process. And the person who brings the application pays a lot of bucks at the end of the day.
Can I ask a question about indirect?
Yep.
I'm going to give 2 examples. You tell me if it's a conflict or not. I'm a member of a Lions Club. There's an official plan change. My zoning on my Lions Club property is changing.
Might be. You need to get advice. I'm going to tell you how to get that advice in a few minutes if you're on council.
My second question is, and I think it applies, I think there's some sort of general rule. My kid's in hockey, and we're changing the fees, so actually it's going to cost me more money for him to be in hockey. I'm not a conflict.
No, I don't think that's a conflict. I don't think so. So the process today is if someone complains and they're elector, they can bring an application to court alleging a breach. On March 1st next year, an elector can bring an application, but so can a person who has a genuine interest in local government. I have no idea what that means, but sitting here tonight, that probably qualifies you. It doesn't have to be within your community. It can be anywhere. And it talks about a person, which means a corporation as well. So what the legislation is now saying is that if you have the complaint, the one that you were at council and you thought, instead of being told go to court, what you're going to be told is just file with the Integrity Commissioner at literally no cost compared to the thousands and thousands of dollars. My prediction is in some municipalities, in some communities, we are going to see an explosion beyond anything people even thought about. There are going to be so many complaints under this legislation. If the member has concerns about, do I have or not, I'm a member of this body, that's the situation where they will be able to go and write to the Integrity Commissioner and say, here are the facts, give me an opinion. And then you will decide whether to comply with that opinion or not. So it's going to make a significant change. So the first complaint will go to the Integrity Commissioner, it will get investigated, and it will then report to Council. And Council will decide on a penalty. But the Integrity Commissioner has the ability under this new legislation not only to go to Council, but to apply to court. And the difference in the penalty is pretty dramatic. Under the legislation, the court finds you have breached the act, you're off council. And you can be off council for up to 7 years, and the court can order restitution. That's damages. Pretty expensive stuff. So integrity commissioners are going to look at these, and many of them they will take back to council with a recommendation, but there are going to be some, and I think a considerable number of these, that ICs are going to apply to court. Okay, here's the skill testing question of the night. Who pays for all this? So do you want to fix the bridge or do you want to pay your IC? Here's the answer. The legislation requires you pay the IC. The world's going to change. Your conduct is going to be put under a microscope as a member of council like never before. I've watched councillors over the years, and I've been doing this a long time, who simply flaunted the act because they knew nobody would take them to court. They didn't have the means or they weren't prepared to do it. That's going to disappear because they are simply going to, instead of raising it at a council meeting, they're going to ask the Integrity Commissioner to do an investigation. We're going to see the bad actors are really going to pay the price, but it's the municipality at the end of the day. So councils, one of the things I'm going to be doing lots of work on after the election is helping councils to understand how they control these members, how you deal with these people, because there are ways to do it. It's a significant change in the law. There's a question back here. Yes, sir.
Bringing up the Integrity Commission, I'm not sure whether this question applies to the Integrity Commission or community. So this time of year, we're all here because we all want to learn about what our rights are and so on and so forth. There are councils throughout this province passing bylaws presently as we speak, past and future, before and first, on how the election process will move forward in terms of signage and so on and so forth. The council members sitting up front are making the decisions to disadvantage some people in this room moving forward. What area would that fall in? Knowing that if they go with it, we have an advantage. If they go against it, it's an equal playing field.
You're not going to like my answer, but I'll give you an answer.
I'm here to hear it.
The province has said the council has certain obligations and certain decision-making around an election. Not very much, frankly. Elections are in the mandate of the municipal clerk. And virtually everything that's run around the election is the responsibility of the municipal clerk. If council's making a decision on that matter, it's because the province has said council makes a decision on that matter. It's as simple as that. They have to be influenced by what they hear, the advice they get, and all the rest. But it's the province has said that they make the decision. Council makes that decision.
To create a bylaw.
To write the bylaw, yeah,
A bylaw.
yeah. On that particular issue, if it's one of the mandated ones for the election that council has some rights on. Okay. I think it's going to be a different world, quite frankly. It's going to really change. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious why this wasn't done like 100 years ago. But I'm just wondering, what really spurred this on? Was it a lot of complaints to the provincial government about this backlog of cases of conflict of interest coming up? I'm just curious what brought this on, because this is, to me, common sense.
You want an answer? I've got an answer.
You can repeat.
Oh.
We can't hear what the audience is
Why didn't this come into effect 100 years ago? Why did the province wait so long? Well, the legislation in '72, the Conflict of Interest Act, came in, And that was to deal with the situation where councillors wanted to bid on contracts and contract with the municipality. So that brought it in. The province has been reluctant since 1972 to amend that act. They've tried a couple of times, but it hasn't gone anywhere. The code of conduct part started around the accountability and transparency piece, and the importance of that starting in 2003, and began to build it. And they have continued to build it now. The province has recognized for a long time that the playing field isn't level. If a ratepayer or an elector in the community has to fund an application against an individual councillor, that's unfair. It's even more unfair because members of council have a policy of insurance that covers them for up to $100,000 in legal fees if they are found not to have breached the act. If they are found to breach the act, it's their nickel they pay. But that insurance is in place as well. So it's a really unlevel playing field. So the province said, we want to balance the playing field out a bit, but I think they've kind of gone a little bit too far. They're going to make it very easy for the public to get into it. We're going to see how it plays out. In some communities, I don't think this is going to even cause a ripple, frankly. But in other places, it's really going to be interesting. And I guess my caution to you is if you're running for council, understand that you are going to be under the microscope, understand that you are going to be held to a high ethical standard, not only around conflict, but around these other issues like confidentiality, appropriate conduct, and all those sorts of things. Is it a good thing? Yeah, probably is a good thing, but it's the reality. I just want you to be familiar and be aware of it. Yep. The question is, does the IC have the right to refuse to investigate? Generally, we put that in terms of, is it frivolous and vexatious? In other words, is this straight politics that doesn't have any merit to it? Or is this the 14th one filed this month, by the same person? Yes, the Integrity Commissioner will have the discretion to determine if it's frivolous or vexatious. And we'll see some of that as well, no question. This expanded scope as well. It's not just electors on conflict of interest. It is electors, the IC, and anyone who has an interest in local government, demonstrated interest. It's going to be very interesting. Okay, I want to flip over for 1 minute, but before I get to water, I want to talk about roads. If you have an accident on a road and you think it's the fault of the municipality, you're entitled to sue the municipality for that. You have to do it in a very, very set of rules that are provincial statutes. But you cannot sue the public works director or members of council or the mayor. You can only sue the municipal corporation. Okay, so that's in the statute. It's been there forever. Now we come to water. In 2002, the province, in a response to Walkerton, passed the Safe Drinking Water Act 2002. And they put it all in place except for one section. And they said to municipalities, the day is coming. And that section says that people within your organization must meet a standard of care. The people in your organization are the decision makers. Who are the decision makers in the municipality? Council and senior staff. Province said, we aren't going to impose this personal liability on you in 2002, but someday we will. 2013 came along and they brought that section into effect, and it's been in effect ever since. And understand this, if MOE lays charges, it can lay them against the corporation, but it can also lay them against individuals, including members of council. A month after that section came into effect, I was doing a program on personal responsibilities at a conference in February. And there was a case going on in southwestern Ontario, and the mayor of that municipality was in the audience. The court found it was 12 or 13 charges, I guess, and sent the water operator to jail The liability now is not only dollars, it's also, personally, it's jail time, potentially. Understand this, if you are being challenged on how you are operating your water system, nobody has sympathy for you. Nobody. This is health and safety. Understand that. It's really important. Keep in mind. The corporate responsibility can be different than yours as an individual. Let me give you a quick example. A report comes from staff to council saying you got to spend this $500,000 on the water system because it needs to be upgraded, and council votes it down, but you vote for it. You need to keep track of every time you vote on something, and you need to keep track of the record, and you need to be asking the clerk for a copy of the resolution, certified copy of the resolution, and put the report. You need to keep it in a file. You need to keep all your training as a member of council. There is training out there. Walker Clean Water Center offers amazing training. Yeah, you take a half-day course and you write an exam. And you're saying, well, how can I be responsible? I'm on council, and you told me I can't put the chlorine in the water. What's going on? What you have to know is how your system is operated. Are the proper checks and balances in place? Is your system long-term effective? Where are you getting your water from? How are you dealing with it? All of those questions. Are you getting independent auditors to do an audit of your system from time to time? And people will say, but we have a contractor. We use Aqua. Doesn't matter. You can't contract out of this liability. It's one more example where the province has said you are going to be, as members of council, accountable for this. By the way, municipal insurance will not cover any fines to you individually. They're yours. So the province has been ramping up this level of responsibility on members of council for a number of years now. And we're seeing March 1st next year, we're going to see some pretty significant changes. It almost sounds at this point like I'm trying to scare you off. I'm not. But I want you to really give serious thought to what it means to be on council. It's not just a matter of getting on council, attending a few meetings, eating rubber chicken, and all that sort of thing. It's a significant responsibility to be a member of council and a community leader. It really makes a difference. There was a question somewhere over here. Yep. You should. I would. Yeah. The question is, should you ask for a recorded vote? If you're voting on water issues to spend money, that's my advice, always, is to ask for a recorded vote. So you want to be able to identify how you did vote on the actual item. Good question. Yes?
In relation to this issue, you mentioned earlier council isn't expected to necessarily be technical experts.
That's right.
So in this case, in particular, if you're receiving bad technical advice or council votes based on bad advice, is council still liable for any?
The answer is maybe. The answer is, are you getting it from one source? Are you getting it from your operator? Are you having it checked from outside sources from time to time? What are the processes in place to ensure that it's there? The other thing about water operators is they're pretty scarce people. Probably not a problem for you, but I can tell you in some small communities, finding people that will do this job is really, really difficult. And if they only have 2 of them on staff, you know, there's things called vacation and weekends and sick leave and all that sort of thing. It can become really difficult. So it's a big issue. Okay, let's sum it up. You've been really patient, and I thank you for your time. Understand municipal government's really complex and technical. I should have put the word on there. It's really fun too. It's really interesting because you are doing things that directly impact your community, that make a difference. Oakville looks like Oakville because council has had an impact over the last decades and years, and through official plans and planning and through a whole series of things. You make an impact on your community. You're a community leader, but it comes with huge responsibility. Powers are exercised by council. I talked about that, not by individual members. Know what you were elected to do. It's really important to take a look at that and spend some time. Understand there are personal obligations. and have a sense of what's involved with them. Talk to municipal staff ahead of time if you have to, just to get a sense about it. And stay tuned for March 2019. I think, in my experience, the municipal world is going to be rocked in some communities in terms of how it deals with some people who have been acting in a somewhat inappropriate way. And finally, I'm really a big believer that you need to talk to your family. The impact is not only on the individual, it's on the members of your family as well. Thank you for being here. I understand some of you are maybe in an election or an appointment process really soon to fill a vacancy. How exciting is that? If there are questions on that, the clerks are all back here and they will have time to answer any questions you may have tonight as well. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and have a good evening.
Don't want to ask too many questions. Like some of his analogies.